which way an artist could be an entrepreneur?
Artists have been entrepreneurs for a very long time. It's the relationship between the industry and the artist that has existed for hundreds of years. If you think about it, even in the Renaissance, artists were entrepreneurs because they were engaging with the economy in a very precise way. They had a workshop where people would go in and talk to them, and they were managing a large business in a way, because they had a lot of apprentices and a lot of people who worked for them, etc., assistants and so on. So in a way, the idea of artist as an entrepreneur is not a new one, but that role has been lost over time, because there's been this idea, which is a very 19th century sort of Victorian idea of the artist alone in his studio or her studio, in a garret somewhere, and existentialism and sadness and loneliness in a way have replaced this idea. But actually, if you look at it historically, that which was a phenomenon caused by the invention of photography, where the artist suddenly lost one of the main sources of income, in a way that was partly due to fashion at the time in the 19th century for gypsy sort of lifestyle and romantic idea of loneliness, but also it was quite a short period, because if you think about it, that was the catalyst for the role of the artist to change. So in a way, the artist lost one of the ways in which they were making money, and then they became conceptual, so that you have Duchamp after that. But the idea of the artist as an entrepreneur in itself has not gone back into the minds of people, and so the public, in a way, the society doesn't recognize being an artist as a profession, and therefore I think that it's important for artists to regain that identity of themselves as professionals. And then that's why, in a way, the artist as an entrepreneur, as a title for my workshop, is a bit of a provocation, because I want artists to regain that conscience of themselves and the awareness that they do have a role in the economy, which I believe very strongly they have.
For the module, you invite as a special guest Richard Shields. Could you say something about your collaboration in this module and beyond as artists?
Richard Shields is an artist that has always worked with the relationship between artists and money. And his practice very much reflects that continuous dialogue that artists have to receive as well as to give from their talent. So he does a lot of projects where he exchanges the work that he does for other things, and he very much embeds the relationship between himself and money into the practice that he does. So I think it was really interesting to collaborate with him on this module, because I invited him because he looks at the relationship between artist and money in a very unconventional way. And I like the way that that discourse can become a holistic discourse, not just about how much is your work worth in terms of money, but also what is your relationship with the economy. And Richard Shields is an artist that does that specifically. We are collaborating together on a number of projects that have to do with banking and artists and the relationship between the patronage and the artist. So it just seemed fitting that we would work together on this module with him as a guest, because he and I have been collaborating for the past 3 years on the eternal dialogue that the artists have with those who support their practice financially. So we did a project with the idea of art collectors and the amount of billions that they invested in art within a year. He uses traditional skills and traditional media to create projects that ride the border between being an object of exchange and a discourse to do with the roles that artists have in the economy. So I thought it was a really good and apt guest to have.
Education is a central part of your career. For several years, you have been teaching in different colleges, seminars, courses, or workshops to help artists to become professional. Why is this subject so important to you?
It's true that in the past 15 years I've been involved with more than 15 different universities and institutions in the UK and Europe, teaching and organizing events and conferences about the figure of the artist as a professional. I was part of a steering group for an organization called Paradox, which looked at different relationships between art students and other sorts of industries. And I particularly looked with that within the ELIA, which is an organization within ELIA, the European League of Institutes of the Arts, looking at the relationship between artists and the industry. Aside from that, I've been lecturing in several colleges in the UK, Italy, and other parts of Europe, specifically in professional development for artists. This is in parallel with my own practice as an artist. And let's say that one of the crucial points of this is that I never wanted my lecturing to overcome my practice, because my lecturing has to come from the point of view of a practicing artist. So I continue my practice as an artist, and that is the main part of what I do. But also the lecturing that I do in professional development is very important, because I think that the provision of professional development in art universities around Europe and abroad as well, away from Europe, is very patchy, is not incredibly coherent, and often it's a piecemeal part of the degree that students do to become artists. And sometimes it pays just lip service to the idea of being trained to work in the real world. And I think that an artist, first and foremost, has to have the dignity to be able to do a job once they are out of college, which means that they have to have the skills and the knowledge to know what happens after college. And I feel that this is not provided in a lot of universities, although there are some exceptions that in some universities that have modules specifically for professional development, but there's very few and far between. So in a way I see it as a sort of mission of mine to create artists of the future who are professional. I really strongly believe that if there are, for example, like in the UK, there are around 3,800 new graduates of art and design every year. And if 3,800 new graduates of art and design go into the world of work without any knowledge of how this works or how the art world works, then they create the situation where they create a sub-market of unprofessional behavior that also harms artists themselves who are trying to make a living out of what they do. I also believe that art in itself is not just a leisure activity, is a proper profession. And I think that if you want to treat it as a profession rather than a hobby, you have to know how to relate to the world of work and how to go about your career, not just making art, but also administering and organizing your work, writing proposals to clients, writing grant applications, knowing how to talk about your practice, writing about your practice effectively, not just academically, presenting yourself, but also knowing how the art world works in the world and in the different art markets that there are throughout the world. It's very important because it gives new artists a sense of where they are and what they can achieve. And if you don't know that there is a horizon, you can't see it. So I want to make sure that the artists who I will definitely work with in the next decades will come from a place of knowledge rather than a place of opacity and uncertainty. I think too many times there's this fear from lecturers or from people who teach at art colleges that they are creating competitors for their own. But actually, so they don't often share the knowledge of the practicalities of being an artist. And I think this is a mistake, because I think that if you create knowledge, you create colleagues rather than enemies. You create collaborators rather than competition. And I believe that this is a much more constructive point of view. I also believe that as Città dell'Arte and Pistoletto are very much engaged in this discourse of the artist as part of the economy, I really very much believe in this, and this is already the sixth time that I collaborate with Città dell'Arte, because I believe that very much the artist has to be part of the economy. So this dialogue has to start where artists train to be such, where people train to be artists, and so they can come out of an education path that allows them to come out with the instruments to create the dignity and the knowledge that they necessitate to work sustainably as artists, rather than depending on waiting on other people to discover them, which doesn't usually happen that way. So it's really important to me, because I think that the role of the artist into the economy has to come from the artists as well, not just from the society. Because if artists themselves believe that they are a viable part of the economy, then society will believe that as well. Okay?